Marilyn Geary. We're at the home of J. Thomas Soltesz at 1801 Shoreline Highway in Muir Beach. And with me is Kramer Herzog, videographer, and Laurie Thompson, librarian of the Antique Kent, California room. So, Tom, please tell us a little bit about your early background.
My early background. Well, I was born in Pennsylvania. Came from a family of 7 children. I was the middle child. I have always been an artist from what I can remember. I still have the drawing I did in 2nd grade that convinced me that I was going to be a professional artist. Grew up in a very small town. Moved to Florida when I was 18 years old and worked for Florida Outdoor Advertising as a billboard painter. So I lived in Florida for a couple of years, and then I moved to Colorado, where I went to school at the Colorado Institute of Art, studying graphic design and advertising. I moved from there in 1976 and moved to the Philippines, where I started a graphic design company in Manila and lived in South Pacific for 5 years, Hong Kong, Papua New Guinea, all doing graphic design and some illustration work. And then I moved back to the States in '82 and went back to school at the Academy of Art College in San Francisco, studying illustration and fine art.
To go over to Asia.
The motivation for going to Asia. I had a friend in art school who was a classmate of mine who was from Manila. And he had a golden opportunity and sent me a plane ticket to Manila and said, let's start a business. So it was that I was 21 years old and it was an opportunity I just couldn't pass up.
Now, what was it like over there?
Well, 1976, it was under martial law. So Marcos was the president. And there were a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of restrictions, of course, being under martial law. But for me, coming from a small town in Pennsylvania and moving to the third world was night and day. I mean, it was wonderful. Filipino people are just incredible. It was a golden opportunity, but it was also a real eye-opener. It's something I recommend for everyone to go and live in the third world for at least a year.
Were you over there?
I was in Manila for 3 years, and then from Manila I moved to Hong Kong. I was in Hong Kong for a year, and then from Hong Kong I was pirated by San Miguel Beer to go to Papua New Guinea to change their corporate identity and their labels for their beer.
And what was that like in Papua New Guinea?
Well, Papua New Guinea, they used to say it's like cannibals and computers in one country. And there were people who still lived up in the mountains that lived in mud huts, and I was lucky. I got a chance to visit those areas. I was hired by a marketing group that was working with San Miguel to travel around the country to try to decide the best ways to promote their products, including soft drinks and beer. And in doing so, it gave me an opportunity to go to all the outlying islands and travel to all the remote places of New Guinea, which was wonderful. The only problem is that they speak over 700 different dialects. So to try to come up with a visual that could relate to all these different tribes was a real challenge. But it was exciting. It was real interesting for me because I got to hold a position in a large corporation that for someone who was 24 years old was a real challenge. And we were written up in the Asian Wall Street Journal. We actually took the company from 17% sales to 60% sales in a matter of 2 years. So they were very happy.
And what did your visuals end up looking like?
It basically was a woodcut that I took from an old canoe that I saw on one of the beaches. And I applied it to towels, shirts, automobiles, trucks, labels. This graphics was all over the country before I left. Everywhere. On the buildings, everywhere. There's no TV. There was one radio station. So to promote products, everything had to be what's called point of purchase. And it had to be very strong visuals. And since you couldn't use words, you had to use symbols and colors. So it was a real educational experience for me. And to live in a place that was so remote and so primitive. There were still remnants of World War II in all the locations. It was like the war had just ended.
What do you mean remnants?
Cannons, ships, tanks, people still talking about the war as if it had just ended. It was fascinating. It was a real eye-opener as far as history goes.
And what were you doing with your art at that point, besides commercially?
At that time, my art was strictly hobby. In those days, I was doing commercial work, which again was graphic design work, and my spare time was spent doing watercolors. Mainly I was a watercolor. I would sketch and I would do watercolors wherever I traveled. It was more for my own entertainment.
And at what point did you come back to the States?
I returned to the States in 1982 and was very excited about returning to school because I really wanted to pursue the career of fine art, my fine art painting. The commercial aspect of it was always a stepping stone. I had an uncle who was a commercial artist in New York for many years back in the 40s and 50s. There were no good schools that taught you drawing, design, perspective, color theory, painting. These things didn't exist in the 60s and 70s. So to really get a good background and the foundation of art, you had to study at a commercial school. And that's what I did.
Oh, and what school did you go to?
Well, I went to the Colorado Institute of Art in Denver. And it was a privately owned school. And they specialized in turning out art directors. They taught you every aspect of advertising, photography, design, layout, composition. It was a very intensive program.
And when you came back from Asia, what did you do in the States?
When I came back from Asia, I was freelancing. And in 1983, if you remember, we had another recession. So the economy kind of tanked in '83. So there was very little freelance work, so I decided to start taking evening classes at the academy. And then a year later, I went as a full-time student. And while I was taking classes, I was still freelancing. I was doing work as an illustrator. I was doing graphic design work, packaging design.
And at what point did you move to Marin County?
I moved to Marin probably 3 or 4 months after moving to San Francisco. I got a job working with a company called 2D 3D out of San Anselmo that was a Canadian-based company.
And at what point did you veer away from doing the commercial work more into your fine art work?
It was always a natural progression. What happened was I was doing mural work. I was doing mural work for interior designers. And they were always asking me to copy fine art paintings on people's walls. So I thought, well, why should I do them on people's walls when I could do my own fine art paintings on canvas and sell them directly to galleries? So that's what I started doing. I would sell them to interior designers, to their clients, but eventually I started approaching galleries, and then it came to the point where galleries were approaching me. People always ask me, what subject matter interests you most of all? And it's not a subject matter. To me, it's an effect. It's the effect that the light has on the objects that I'm painting. I never know what I'm going to paint until I'm out in my car or motorcycle or horse riding, and all of a sudden I see something. And I'll note the time of day it is, I'll note the angle, the light, and I'll come back the next day at that same time and set up my paints and get that impression that I got that first time. And one of the biggest pleasures I get from my art is when the collector tells me, I've had my painting in your wall for 5 years and I love looking at it every day. To me, that's a successful painting.
So they call this plein air painting what you do?
Yes, it's French for painting out of doors in the open. Artists since the beginning of time have been inspired by nature. It's very easy to paint a building or a street scene because it's not going to change. It's going to be there. It's everything, your focal point is there. Whereas if you're out on location and you're painting a landscape, you have to create a focal point. You have to create the direction for the eye to go through the painting. It's more challenging to do a landscape painting. Also, I love nature. I love being out in the middle of a field somewhere and not having anyone around for hours. And that's where your mental state really comes into play in painting, because you are so relaxed and it takes so much concentration when you're painting. I've had coyotes walk right up to me because I'm not moving. I've had birds almost land on my easel because you're just so engrossed in the scene, in the situation, that you're almost oblivious to what's happening around you. So the saying of you're in the moment is so true when you're painting, because you really are in the moment.
What is your favorite place to paint here in Marin County?
Everywhere. Out my back door, out my front door, down at the beach. I mean, I can walk 5 minutes in any direction. I have stacks of paintings that I've done just from right here in the corner. That's what I love about Marin. That's the reason I moved to Marin. Everywhere you go is a scene.
How did you happen to end up out here in your beach?
My horse brought me out here. I was given a horse about 15 years ago from a friend who asked me to help her with her foal, a 1-year-old. Well, she disappeared, so I ended up with a horse. And I've always loved Muir Beach, and I knew they had stables out here, so it's worked out great ever since. I've got a nice little studio, I've got a couple of outbuildings, I've got the greatest location for painting. I can walk down to the beach in 5 minutes, be in the city in 20. It's ideal. It's just perfect for me. The trails here are just amazing. I mean, you could ride all the way to Oregon from here. I ride all the way down to Tennessee Valley, up to Mount Tam. Mainly I ride down to Muir Woods now, and then up to Diaz Ridge, which is a good, I could ride for 3 hours and not see a soul. I mean, how many cities can you be 20 minutes from and ride a horse for 3 hours and not see a soul? Only in Marin County. Every time I'm out painting, every time I'm out riding my horse, I'm constantly being inspired by things that I see. And always looking for new scenes to paint. I mean, he's taken me to a lot of places I never would have gotten to just hiking. You know, so by riding the horse, of course, I can't paint with him because he'll wander around while I'm painting. But he's exposed me to a lot of new locations, painting locations, where the next day I'll go back and hike into. And all my paints will fit in I have 2 backpacks that I carry with me, and I can do anything up to a 20 by 24 painting on location. And the nice thing about Marin is that we have so many artists in Marin, so we can feed off each other. And I do belong to a couple groups of artists, the California Art Club and the Baywood artists. And artists need that. You know, for years, artists have always had colonies where they would get together, artist groups. Those days are pretty much gone. It's like Sausalito was an artist colony. Well, there are very few artists living in Sausalito who can afford to live in Sausalito. So you've got to find ways to get organized artists together and support each other, because it's very, very important.
Can you talk a bit about the Baywood artist group?
Sure. The Baywood Artist Group were formed about 10 years ago. There are 13 of us, and our objective is to save what we can of this beautiful land that we have. There's still areas of Marin County that are endangered of being developed, of being lost. There's still parcels of land that they're trying to buy. There's projects that various aspects of the park's trying to do that they don't have the funds for. So the Baywood artists are a group of artists that got together to try to make a difference by saving various plots of land, and we've been doing this for, like I say, 10 years, and we've made a pretty good impact. We've probably raised close to $250,000 so far.
Well, can you talk about which areas, plots
Yes.
of land that you were
Yes,
involved in?
last year our show benefited the Angel Island. They just had a fire about a month before our show. We've done benefits for Hawthorne Canyon. We've done benefits to eradicate invasive species of Scotch broom, of eucalyptus in Tennessee Valley. We've done a couple shows for the Golden Gate Park Association, Mount Tam. Next year we're going to be doing a benefit for Point Reyes, and this year the benefit was for Mount Diablo.
Who have been some of your major influences in your painting?
There's so many, especially California artists. People don't realize that the Impressionists of California were probably much better painters than the European Impressionists, the French Impressionists, East Coast Europeans, East Coast Impressionists. They just didn't get the recognition. Back in the 40s and 50s and even the 20s and 30s, there was a lot of European artists, Percy Gray, with the Wachtels, Edgar Payne. These guys were the original plein air painters. They were from Europe, they were from the East Coast. A lot of them were commercial artists, but they were painting Marin County, Mount Tamalpais, Pasadena. A lot of them were based downtown San Francisco. The Matthews, Arthur Matthews, all these people. There was a building where the Trans Am building is now that was an old brick building that was destroyed during the 1906 earthquake, which was a major center for a lot of the artists in San Francisco. Arthur Matthews and all these people used to hang out there. After the earthquake, they were all afraid, and most of them left the city. Percy Gray moved up here to San Anselmo.
What is it like living adjacent to national recreation area and out here in nature? When, as you say, you can just walk out the door.
As a landscape artist, I couldn't ask for more. It's the perfect location for a landscape artist. I love painting rocks. I love painting the ocean. I love painting the mountains. I love painting the hills, trees, the barn. It's all here. Within 5 minutes, I've got every subject matter I could ask for, including a few models down at the barn, horses and people. I love painting landscapes because I just love being out in nature. I love being in a field. I love being in the mountains. I love being in the trees. And it doesn't necessarily have to be Marin. I take my paints to Italy. I take my paints to the Philippines, to Mexico, to Hawaii. No matter where I am, I take my paints with me.
And how long have you been participating in the Marin Agricultural Land Trust shows?
The Mulch Show I think I've been involved in for about 6 or 7 years now. 6 or 7 years. And it's also another great group of people. Anytime Malt asks me to do something, I'm right there for him.
How long do you foresee being able to continue doing what you're doing?
A lot of people ask me, what are you going to do when you retire? I said, well, what do most people do when they retire? They paint. So I've basically been retired for the past 15, 20 years. I'll die with a paintbrush in my hand. As an artist, you don't stop painting. You constantly hope you get better and better as the years go by. And short of losing my sight or my ability to hold a paintbrush, I'll continue to paint. And God willing, I'll paint until the day I die.
Well, thank you very much for your interview.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.